And we are live. This hangout is on air live, and just by a little bit you missed something. So it is the Audible Live Thursday night, youtube.com, footballguys.com, Cecil Lammy, Sigmund Blue, Matt Waldman, Dr. Gene Bramall. Fellas, it's great to be back. Thank you for last week giving me the week off to go see Sebastian Bach. It was a great time. I heard you guys kind of mentioning it at the beginning of your show last week, so that was awesome. Bloom, I do need to note for the listening audience, it was Cheyenne to Fort Collins in 16 minutes.
Cheyenne to Fort Collins, 16 minutes.
That's 42 miles in 16 minutes. So, yeah, Cheyenne to Denver.
Yeah.
That'd be a little impossible. But anyway, so
16 minutes.
Yeah, great time. I actually got to feel like a rock star because me and Frank Schwab standing next to a barrier, like on the VIP section because we were on the guest list, and there was a lady that showed us her underwear so that she could stand in front of us, and not by request, just felt like a rock star, man. I was like, this happens to Sebastian Bach all the time. Panties thrown on the stage, and I was like, this is like Sebastian Bach. So anyway, we live the rock and roll lifestyle. Bloom, you're not paying attention because the Stanley Cup's going on.
Yeah, I tried not to watch these games because of the aging factor. It's excellent, Penguins potentially. The last time that a Pittsburgh team won a championship in Pittsburgh was when Bill Mazeroski hitting the home run to knock out the 1960 Yankees. You all remember that. It was like it was yesterday. So it's been a while, and the way the Penguins are playing tonight, we'll see. Let's talk some football and get my mind off of this.
Yeah, let's talk some football. Looks like Matt's ready to change the channel just because we brought up Pittsburgh.
No, I'm fast-forwarding through the halftime of San Diego State, Cincinnati, and the Hawaii Bowl after I watched a Sebastian Bach lookalike beefed up with weight room training do a little somersault into the end zone on a Donald Humphrey halfback pass.
Right. See, this is why I love you, Matt, because just like Bloom, whenever you talk to Bloom, it's like, I got some MFL 10s going on right now, blah, blah. And then anytime you talk to Matt, it's like, I'm just watching some film. So there you go. Dr. Gene Bramall, an upgrade to the computer hardware? Dr. Gene, what's going on here?
I could use one, I think. I told my wife last week that you weren't here because you were out watching Sebastian Bach, and she wanted to know if you were watching Gilmore Girls, because apparently that dude has been on Gilmore Girls.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's not.
She knows who Sebastian Bach is, so that's something, right?
That's cool. But unless Gilmore Girls is on Brazzers, I'm probably not going to watch it. Anyway, let's move on from that, and that is a sorry Joe. We're 5 minutes into this thing, and let's get into tonight's news. We're going to go with Dr. Gene Bramall, talk about some injury news from around the National Football League, and I'm going to start in New England, Dr. Gene, because Julian Edelman is absent. I really don't know how to take this because it is New England, and we never really know. I mean, there could be lots of problems with Julian Edelman that we'd never know because it is New England. How do you handle something like this when we've got mandatory minicamp going on and Julian Edelman isn't there and we really don't know why? It's a foot.
Yeah, I don't think he's supposed to be there yet. He just had revision surgery in May, and I think they're going to give him every bit of the 10 to 12 weeks that it often takes to recover from that. So I think we're probably going to see him at some point during training camp. I don't know that it's going to be early in training camp. I wouldn't necessarily expect him to start on PUP. But it's not a surprise he's not there yet, and like so many of these other veterans who don't need a lot of off-season time, he's going to take his time coming back. If he's on PUP and we're not liking what we hear at the end of July, early August, then it's time to get concerned. But for now, probably no harm, no foul in New England.
Gene, does LaShawn McCoy sitting out OTAs with a hamstring, does this change your outlook on him? I mean, is this one of those things where if you already didn't like him, well, now you just don't draft him, and if you liked him, then maybe you get a discount?
Yeah, the only thing I don't mind about this is we were pretty worried about his high hamstring injury last year, and he came back and looked pretty effective after he recovered. So you don't like the fact that he's had yet another soft tissue injury, yet another hamstring problem. But he did recover pretty effectively last year. The difference is Carlos Williams was effective last year, so maybe this puts Williams in a little bit larger timeshare role than even what we expected. But there's plenty of time for him to recover from what even if it is a mid-grade injury that's a 6 to 8 week situation, and there's no indication that's what it is. But even if that's the case, he should be good to go by training camp, and hopefully they give him all the time he needs to recover, and it's not in the spot where he's likely to re-aggravate it very quickly in camp.
Gene, Amir Abdullah, shoulder injury. What's going on with that? What do you think we should expect from him, knowing that he may miss much of the preseason?
Yeah, I think he'll be okay. It was one of those things where it's not a huge issue for a running back, but anytime there's a labral injury, in this type of situation, you think that they're worried a little bit about instability in the joint, and you certainly don't want his shoulder popping out at any point to where it's going to be a recurrent issue all year long. He played through a couple of games toward the end of last year and did so okay, but to have it tightened up greatly reduces his risk of having any problems with it this year. It's a 4 to 6 month situation generally. He had the surgery in January. He should be ready for camp. I haven't heard anything from Detroit that makes us think that he won't be. So, like so many of these other players, not pup is going to be the next indication of how they are and where they are in their rehab.
Well, Dr. Gene, an interesting story across the newswire today about Alan Hearns being allergic to grass. Now, I know there's a Colorado joke in there somewhere, but what is this something we don't necessarily hear about? We know that allergies happen, but I just thought, that's funny. I'm going to ask Gene about it. He's allergic to grass, and that's why he wears the long sleeves.
Yeah, I guess somebody had to find a different angle than whatever the other angles were going to be right around this contract extension. I'm sure there's plenty of guys that have seasonal allergies. Some of them are a little worse than others. Clearly, it's never been an issue for him in the past. I doubt it's going to be an issue going forward.
Gene Halikikaha tore his ACL today. I'm trying to find out whether it was his left or his
I haven't been
right.
able to find either. You see it yet?
No, I haven't, because he's tore the left twice, right? Including once while he was coming back from the first one.
Yeah.
But either way,
either way. I mean, we know there's an increased
that,
risk. Yeah, I mean, even the opposite side, the good side, is at a higher risk of being torn than the side that's been repaired, the graft being torn itself. So this is something I think we're going to see more and more and more of, not only second tears but third tears, similar to what we've seen with Thomas Davis, because players are recovering so effectively from the first tear and from the second tear and now from the third tear. We just wonder, it's probably going to be a matter of time before, it's probably not going to be this year necessarily, but one of these guys is probably going to have a fourth tear somewhere down the line. If a player as young as Kikaha has had his third, somewhere down the line we're going to see a guy with a fourth probably. Thomas Davis has shown us the way. There have been many, many players that have recovered from a second tear, whether it's the same knee or the opposite knee. He's got, I don't think we're going to see him this year, unfortunately, at this point. It's going to be hard for him to get back by the end of this particular regular season. The Saints would have to be doing very well. Kikaha's recovery would have to be going just perfectly for him to be back this year. So I think we'll probably see him go on injured reserve, and 2017 is going to be his next ETA.
So, Gene, what do we think about Arian Foster actually signing with the team? Do we think it's actually going to happen this year, or is this something that's just more of him trying to make the rounds to get signed with the team, and maybe contribute later on in the season? I mean, how close is he really ready to being able to take the field?
Well, the injury was in October, and it tends to be an 8 to 9 month injury, and we've seen older players recover fully from this. Foster's deal is that he never seems to be able to get over any of these soft tissue strains. So he's got to prove not only that he's in good physical condition from the Achilles injury, but I think he's got to prove that he's in relatively good football conditioning, because it's a risk to put him back on the field and hope that he gets through hamstring, groin, quad, groin, whatever he's had in the past. And I don't think teams have a relatively set depth chart heading into camp right now. So, it's going to have to be a team that's looking to bring in a Foster not as their primary player. If there's, you wonder if maybe at this point you're looking at Foster stepping into a situation where there's been an injury early in camp, and at that point he'll have a good 8 months of recovery time, and maybe even close to 9.5, depending on when that comes. I think that's what we're going to see at this point, but I don't think we're seeing Foster signed to be a 200-touch player at this point. He's going to be a change of pace, probably a passing down situation at best, where maybe they put him out in the slot, as Houston has done from time to time. And then if the primary back is injured, or Foster has proven that he can get through a number of weeks without any cascade or compensatory injuries, then maybe we see him do a little bit more. But I don't think there's any reason to believe that we can count on him to be anything more than that by week 1.
I love the rapid fire questions for Dr. Gene, because he's like Quicksilver, like everything's just slow motion for him, and he's just moving stuff in air. Like, what is this? Come on, faster. Let's do it again. Gary Barnage, big play Barnage. That was an X-Men reference. I know all of you guys are like, I have no idea who Quicksilver is. Anyway, Gary Barnage said he had hernia surgery when he did, so he wouldn't miss any time during the regular season. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah, I think, a lot of these core abdominal things, we've seen them 3 weeks, we've seen them 8 weeks. Generally, they kind of fall into that 4 to 6 week time frame. And as we talk about with so many of these other players this time of year, they're waiting and waiting and waiting, hoping that they can rehab these things non-operatively. And then when it gets up to this time where, you can basically subtract 8 weeks from today and you're a week or two into camp. You can subtract 4 to 5 weeks from today and you're at the start of camp. And that's what's going on here. Whether or not it's something that happened recently or whether or not it's something that they were trying to rehab, hope would get better, and these core abdominal issues generally don't. That's what's going on here. And whenever you hear a player goes to Philadelphia for hernia surgery, that's what it is. It's a sports hernia deal, and you can expect that 4 to 6 week range. And we've seen many, many players recover effectively and right on time with this injury and not have complications going forward, with a couple of rare exceptions when there's been more than one muscle injured and maybe they didn't repair the other one while they were in there. Adrian Peterson fell into that category. I think there was one other player that's not coming immediately to mind, a skill position player that did as well. But barring any sort of unusual setbacks or getting back into condition type injury, he should be ready for camp.
Gene, about a week and a half ago, Dennis Pitta was back out on the field. John Harbaugh said he looked good. He looked like Dennis Pitta to me. Is there any way he's going to look like Dennis Pitta used to look in the box scores, or even make this team after fracturing his hip twice?
Yeah, I suppose anything's possible, but everything that I've read from any orthopedic surgeon or otherwise suggests that 2 hip dislocations, one involving a fracture at least, if I'm recalling correctly, is just really difficult to come back from. And I think it's been 3 years now since he's been on the field and playing effectively. So he's that much older. Is it possible? Yeah, I think anything's possible. But I think looking good in May is a lot different than looking good on the field in, September, October. So he's going to have to look good through training camp. He's going to have to prove that there's nothing in that hip that sets him up for yet a third severe injury, and that's what happened the last time. He was only back for a little bit where he was full go and suffered another injury. So, the risk of recurrence is there. The risk that he's not going to be fully, what he was in the past is really very much there. So see what he looks like in training camp and cross our fingers and hope for the best.
Gene, it looks like Aaron Rodgers won't be doing any Got Milk commercials anytime soon. He's removing dairy from his diet, and
isn't that illegal in Wisconsin?
I'm thinking that he's trying to get maybe this is a conspiracy for him to get out of Green Bay. Maybe he doesn't want to be there at this point, because I'm wondering the same thing, Cecil. So he says it's to extend his career and stay healthy. What's the correlation here from your standpoint, if any?
I don't know. I have no idea. Unless he's, I'm not even going to speculate. I think it's just something that players do, want to make a change in their diet, want to make a change in their situation. We see weight changes. We see, and it may just be another situation where, guys are out of things to report this time of year. They're just patient. It's been OTAs. It's the first time you get these guys back. Aaron Rodgers is a guy that likes to talk. This comes out, and that's a different angle that I can take to a story. And I don't mean to. I'm not trying to belittle beat writers or saying that they're not effectively doing their job. But I don't think Aaron Rodgers removing dairy from his diet is going to have any impact at all on his regular season.
What do you mean it's OTAs and there's nothing to write about? Trevor Siemian's going to be the starter for the Broncos. Anyway, the portion of this program
go to the Hall of Fame.
Portion of this program is brought to you by Reality Sports Online, a powerful fantasy platform that lets you build and manage your fantasy team like a real-life GM. Platform features the revolutionary free agency auction room and has tons of other cool features like a rookie draft, franchise tags, which I love, automated contract and salary cap functionality, and much, much more. I want you to visit realitysportsonline.com today and use the promo code AUDIBLE for 10% off the platform fee. That's realitysportsonline.com. Let's send it around a time or two more for Dr. Gene Bramall. And I want to talk about Aqib Talib. You talk about the gift that keeps on giving. Thank you, Denver Broncos. And, this Aqib Talib situation, I'm not going to say thank you for that. I'd say something else for it. And not whether or not he shot himself or if he was a victim of a gun crime here. Not the lack of judgment at being 30 years old, having your third incident with a gun outside a Dallas strip club. This was number 2. I don't know if it was the same club, but the last time when charges were dropped, there was somebody in his party that fired a handgun into the air. Police couldn't find anything, and they charged, and they dropped the charges. Well, he had a bullet, and he should be thankful that this isn't much, much worse, okay? Every day in studio, I sit next to an autographed picture of Darrent Williams, who has gone way too soon. And you talk about a young playmaker for the Denver Broncos, was a great return man, up-and-coming corner, killed in an incident, died in Javon Walker's lap. I mean, with very, very heavy situation that happened when Darrent Williams was shot and killed. And the whole Brandon Marshall situation, how that played in back then. So we could go down memory lane that way, Dr. Gene. But recovering from a bullet wound that grazed your right thigh and went through your right calf but didn't hit anything major, what are we looking at here? And do you feel like the league is sitting there waiting, going, we can't wait to suspend you for a year?
Yeah, Sean Taylor. Sean Taylor had a bullet in his upper leg and bled out from a femoral artery laceration. So, the trajectory of this makes you think that he was probably sitting down. I have a hard time thinking that he had a bullet that went through his thigh all the way into his calf if he was standing up. So I think that makes a little bit more sense.
The rumors are, Dr. Gene, and this is just the rumors because the police are investigating this as an aggravated assault, is that he was pulling it out of the back waistband and it discharged as he was pulling it out of his back waistband.
Well, if that's the case, then it probably was very much a graze in the thigh and then down into the calf a little bit. Adam Schefter saying no ligament injuries, no vascular injuries, and obviously if he was discharged from the hospital that quickly, it was mostly a situation where they were cleaning up lacerations, make sure there weren't any other deep tissue injuries. And the big issue in these situations is, anytime you get something that goes through the skin and then carries through into the deeper tissues, you can have bacteria from the skin that gets seeded into that wound and have an infection. So the big concern here is not only just the recovery from the laceration, which may not be a huge deal if it didn't involve any deeper structures, including, big muscle belly issues or anything like that, but to make sure in the coming weeks, next 2, 3, 4 weeks, that he doesn't suffer any infection from these type of injuries. And that's a small risk, but it's definitely a possible risk. And then it's just a matter of, recovering, and I don't mean to minimize it at all, but a matter of recovering from whatever happened laceration-wise, and that can take, generally, in the leg area, it's usually a 2 or 3 week process and maybe a little bit longer for the scar underneath the tissue to heal. But from the outside, at the skin lacerations, which is really going to be the limiting factor for him being cleared to do much in the way of conditioning and otherwise, it's probably a 2 or 3 week situation. So got another month before we're certain that he's out of the woods, so to speak, from infection and other issues. And I don't know what the league's going to say. It depends on what the result of the investigation was, whether or not there was anything else involved other than, the injury itself. You may know more about that than I do, but hopefully, from what we've heard so far, it really shouldn't be something that's going to limit him from a physical standpoint.
Gene, Jonathan Stewart's foot, it's sore. It's still sore. We know he injured it during the season, then we know he re-injured it in the Super Bowl, and it's June, and it's sore. Normally, but Jonathan Stewart, one of your favorite guys to talk about.
Yeah, and I think, Stewart, the last, has been pretty impressive because at least I shouldn't say me, had been saying that he had the legs of a, 32, 34-year-old running back, and there's quite a little bit of renaissance we've seen out of him over the past couple of years. I think lots and lots of these players, if you ask how they feel, you would hope that the off-season has allowed them to fully recover and feel wonderfully, but, a player like Stewart is probably, I don't know, how long has he been in the league? 7, 8 years now? All the miles that he's got on there, all of the injuries that he's been through, all the surgeries that he's had, foot, ankle, otherwise, these guys are still going to be sore. And whether it's enough to keep him to where he's not going to be able to tolerate 20-plus touches a game over the long period of time, over the long term this season, is hard to say. Hopefully we won't see them feeling like they have to manage his practice reps earlier in the season. I think like any veteran, Edelman's and everybody else we've already talked about, we're very likely to see him not do much consecutively as far as practices go in training camp. That's just not going to be necessary for him. But if we start to hear that they're managing his practice reps already early in the season, or there are any soft tissue injuries that could be a cascade situation because he's compensating for any pain that he might have in his foot, then I think we need to be concerned. But this time of year, I generally don't get bothered about veterans who don't have a well-defined injury until we get to training camp and start to hear some more specific concerns.
Gene DeAndre Smelter, the San Francisco 49ers wide receiver who sat out last year with an ACL tear. Well, according to Matt Burrows of the Sacramento Bee, said that he's not really practicing in full. He also said that he's not really he's often requiring maintenance from trainers. And Chip Kelly's just telling reporters that it's just the knee's nagging him a little bit, but it's not an injury, and that they're summing it up as likely just adjusting to a layoff of a year from football and having to rehab. What say you?
Well, something's probably up. How early in his final college season? Do you remember how early?
It was like November, December when he had it happen.
Yeah, so I mean, we know it's been at least a year, so you have to wonder, as the suggestion was there, as you said, is it something more than the ACL? Is the ACL the issue at all? And we like to just sort of accept that players are going to recover fully from an ACL in 9 months or so, but there are still a small percentage of guys that just don't make it back for whatever reason. Is there some scarring that happened? Was there some sort of setback that we don't know about because he's not as closely followed as Jordy Nelson, Kelvin Benjamin, Dion Lewis, Jamal Charles, what have you? Or is this, when it's being called a nagging situation, has he had some sort of soft tissue issue? Is there a hamstring or a groin or something else that's going on as he tries to recover? So I don't think we're going to know the answer to that until we get a little bit closer to camp and we can get some more details. But it's not a great sign that he's still not ready to participate in the off-season activities because, there's enough going on in San Francisco anyway. The depth chart is wide open for these guys, but he's got to get on the field and build a rapport with whoever the quarterback's going to be and prove that he can run routes and be effective in order to get on the field.
It is the Audible Live each and every Thursday night right here, youtube.com/footballguys, DOTCOM. Go ahead and subscribe on iTunes. You can hear this show in the audio form, of course. We appreciate everyone out there as our audience continues to grow and grow. Thank you. It's a pleasure to talk about football with this quaternary, and we dig the fact that so many of you enjoy it. Let's go one more time. Quickly, Dr. Gene, and back to New England, and I guess I must have a tinfoil hat. I did bring the Roadrunner fade back. Bloom, I know you're in the Penguins there, but you just witnessed my hair. But I think I might have a tinfoil hat because what the hell's going on with Gronkowski? Did anyone ever find anything out about this mystery ailment? What is it? The brown bottle flu? I don't know.
I don't think there's any mystery ailment. I think they know that every player has a risk of injury, and they really cannot tolerate an injury to Gronkowski this season. Both LeGarrette Blount and Dion Lewis are coming off injuries. Julian Edelman and Danny Amendola are not healthy yet. To put Rob Gronkowski out there in a totally meaningless situation just doesn't make any sense at all. So there could be something going on. I think mystery ailment is exactly what it is. I think it being Gronkowski, it being such a significant situation, if there was anything to know, hopefully one of the major media members would have sniffed it out already. So let's just work under the assumption that there's much ado about nothing here, and then if we get closer to camp and hear about some concerns, then we'll drill down on it a little bit more.
Gene, we haven't really talked much about Joe Flacco and his knee injury. It sounds like from everything you hear out of Baltimore that they're putting it almost in pen that he's going to be back, at least for week one, if not for training camp and business as usual. Is this one of those situations where a knee injury that might be more devastating for a running back or a wide receiver, quarterbacks can come back quicker and closer to their full form because of the nature of the position?
Yeah, I think so, and that's not to minimize how well Flacco's recovered from this injury. You'd still like to see him out there. It was a multi-ligament injury. It was ACL and MCL, so the joint was unstable in a couple of different directions. If you were going to pick another ligament to go with the ACL, you probably would have picked the MCL as long as there's not some big cartilage issue that we just haven't heard about going along with it. So you would think that he'd still be able to get back within that 9 to 10 month time frame, and that would put him towards the middle of the season, but his recovery is going so well that he's more likely to hit that kind of 6 to 8 month time frame, and there's been nothing out of Baltimore that suggests he's not way ahead in his rehab. And you're exactly right, there's not a whole lot of position sense that has to be recovered in that knee for a quarterback. He basically is never the most mobile player anyway. He needs to be able to stand in the pocket and have a strong base, and if he's able to do that, he's going to be fine to return, and that really sounds like it's going to be the case with him.
Gene, Dante Moncrief had turf toe surgery, and he's expected to return sometime this summer. But is this something that we should be concerned about long term with him in terms of being able to find a good orthotic and especially at a position where you have to do all the planting that he has to do as a route runner?
Yeah, for sure. But we're hearing more and more and more about teams adequately getting orthotics, made specially for these players, and I think that'll be the case with Moncrief. Most players recover from this surgery within 3 to 4 months without any trouble. He's already out of the boot, should be cleared to run in advance of training camp, and he may not be fully ready to go early in camp, but there doesn't seem to be any concern about the regular season. But players will tell you that it takes more than just the 3 to 4 months to feel fully recovered over that toe to the point where they can fully flex and extend it and run routes, dip into routes, explode out of routes, get off the line effectively. It takes longer than 3 to 4 months to do that. So I think whenever he does come back, if it's the preseason or if it's early in the regular season, I think you're going to want to watch his route running carefully, and that's something that we can do. We'll be able to look at all 22 and see how he does, see if he's taking extra steps, see how effectively he's separating both deep and at the line of scrimmage. And if we don't really like what we're seeing, maybe you take that as a buy low candidate. Maybe you mean that, we're just going to have to wait on him a little bit longer, and he's somebody that could get a little bit better as the season goes along. Lots of guys have done fine from turf toe surgery. I don't think it's going to be a longer term issue for him, but if he starts a little bit slowly, it won't be a big shock.
Cecil, this Dakota Gordon guy is upstaging Sebastian Bach right now.
We will continue that conversation as we get into the news portion of the program, which is brought to you by FanDuel.com. 1 day, 1 week fantasy sports. FanDuel.com. You go there, build your team, super easy, stay under the salary cap, sit back and watch your team win. FanDuel.com, and we have a special offer for the listeners. New FanDuel users will get a free Football Guys Insider Pro subscription with a $10 deposit. Just have to use our code FBGPOD. That is for new FanDuel users. So Football Guys Insider Pro subscription, yes please, $10 deposit. Make sure you use our code FBGPOD at FanDuel.com, where every week is a new season. That's FanDuel.com. Make sure to sign up today. All right, fellas. Now, this is the way that I get tricky and sneak in an extra question for Dr. Gene, because I want to talk about Jared Cook. And Bloom, I want to start with you about Jared Cook nursing the foot injury. They say there's no long-term concern. Ted Thompson very nervous around free agents, but he got one, and Jared Cook. And I just think about Rodgers, and we know Cobb's going to ball out. We know that Jordy Nelson back, that's going to help things out. Behind him, there's some interesting third wide receivers, and by interesting, I don't mean Devontae Adams, but there's some names to watch, some guys to watch, some emerging talents there. Your Jeff Janis's, etc. Ty Montgomery, a player that I like. But then I just keep thinking, Rodgers with a tight end, and Rodgers with a damn athletic tight end like Jared Cook, and you think there's some value here, especially for a player that's going off the board at 1304 in 12-team PPR league. So what's the book on Cook in your eyes, Bloom?
Right.
And is there something more here than tight end 17? That's his current ADP.
There could be, and you brought up some of the reason why. None of the third wide receiver candidates have at least convinced us that they could be there this year. Jeff Janis, it was pretty funny that there was a lot of addressing this week of how much the Green Bay fan base and Twitter loves Jeff Janis. Even Aaron Rodgers said, "I love Jeff Janis. All you people love Jeff Janis." But he's not there yet. Ty Montgomery coming back from the injury. Devontae Adams, we all know what he did, and there's a little bit of buzz about him. Even Jared Abbrederis, who Rodgers likes a lot. But it's very easy to see somebody else emerging as the third wide receiver or the third option, and Cook being a red zone option. Look, we've talked about Jared Cook a lot more on this show than his actual play and production merits, because he was compared to Calvin Johnson, right? I mean, there's a point that athletically, back at South Carolina, or around the time that he was just, his star was on the rise there, and if you watched him back at South Carolina, you did see a guy who at 6'5", 240, did certain things, moved in ways that it was eye-popping. It just never translated. It could translate with a smarter quarterback. It could translate in an offense. I mean, look what Richard Rodgers is a stiff, and look what he did. Some of it was that Hail Mary. So I was open to it. Now, this foot injury, I was saying maybe he's a second tight end that you draft and you see how they start out the season. Maybe he becomes your number one tight end. But now I might be in a more of a wait and see to see how he is at the beginning of training camp, because with a new quarterback, a new offense, you want to see some of that continuity built if you're going to draft him. The upside's there athletically and with his quarterback and with the situation, but he needs to be on the field.
Yeah, Jared Cook was on this show years and years ago.
Right.
I was going through my contacts, and I was like, Jared Cook? Oh, yeah, we had him on the show like in 2007 or whatever it was. Anyway, Matt, your thoughts as you've got your toolbox ready. What are you going to screen share with us, buddy? Let's talk a little Jared Cook.
Everyone recognize this guy? Anybody want to tell me who he is? His name's Christine Michael.
Yes.
Yeah, we can't see the full. We can't see the head here, but the A&M guy, bright and shiny toy. We all love the bright and shiny toys. Christine Michael is certainly a guy that has, how would I say it, has held lots of promise, has gotten lots of chances, has not made good on a single one of them. And I think that Jared Cook probably falls in that category at this stage of his career. So is it possible? Yeah, sure. And I think Bloom's reasoning of, well, Richard Rodgers isn't that great of an athlete. But one thing Richard Rodgers might have over Jared Cook is that he apparently has the game together when it comes to the mental side of the game, and being able to be consistent enough to take a field and maximize whatever tools he has. Jared Cook maximized the tools that he had. I think that he wouldn't be on, his fourth team now, or his third team now at this stage of his career.
But his first team without Jeff Fisher, so does that change some things?
It might be Jeff Fisher, because Todd Gurley certainly hasn't played well yet, or let's look at it that way. But I'll say this. It's possible, but I certainly wouldn't consider him until tight end 15, 16, 17 range if I'm going to be generous about him not being tight end 18.
Well, I think a lot of today's show is going to be that fact or fiction as we get to certain players. At this point, mandatory minicamps going on. You're hearing that minicamp buzz, the OTA reports, and I will defend OTA reports. Not everyone, not Trevor Siemian's going to start, but I'll defend OTA reports because for guys like us, it's time to assemble clues, and we are Sherlock Holmes. So get the magnifying glass. I want to know everything. This is the time when Mike Reese says, hey, watch out, this Wes Welker guy. Like, these are times when you can assemble those clues. The Jared Cook foot thing, they're not concerned about it. Dr. Gene, how concerned are you?
I don't think we need to be too concerned about it. It's likely yet another one of these fifth metatarsal injuries. When you hear that it's a preventative situation, you hear that it's a foot, and you hear it's surgical, it's almost always that. And this time of year, if a player is expected to get back in that 8 to 10 week range, that's what it's going to be. And we've seen lots of players to recover from that. With regard to Cook, I'm happy to play with a shiny new toy with Aaron Rodgers. I think that's okay, especially if you're not looking at a player that's going to get lots and lots of targets, but I think there's some red zone opportunities there. And I haven't fully done my offensive tiers yet, but I don't think there's a whole lot after that first and maybe second tier of tight ends that excites you anyway. So if you're looking for an upside flyer a little bit late, you could probably do worse than a player that hopefully builds up enough rapport with Aaron Rodgers to be a red zone option. And what's the percentage chance of that happening? It may not be high, but I think there's enough there that it's worth taking a look at later in the draft.
I should put in the Todd Haley drop here, Bloom, where it says private time between two coaches. And Todd Haley saying, here's another OTA report, Sammy Coates is performing well. We know the opportunity that is there for Coates, but again, in a younger and haven't disappointed us every single year like Jared Cook has, Sammy Coates is there with that. He plays larger than his size. He's not overly tall, but he has a nice wingspan. Seems a bit like Chris Chambers to me, where he'll reach out and snare those passes. But the drops, we know he's got speed, but the drops, Bloom. He's performing well in OTAs. What are you picking up on with Sammy Coates, and how much can you believe in him in a Steelers offense that's going to need more weapons? And we have to bring up the tight end position here, too, as a big question mark with Green banged up and Heath Miller gone.
Yes, and I think that at his price, he's definitely worth a shot. If I can get him 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th round, end game. to see what happens. Yes, what we've had already, Ed Bouchette, who we don't take lightly, has been covering the Steelers for a long time, saying the coaches clearly believe he's going to do well by how they're talking him up. People telling him he's in great shape, had a great offseason. And looking at last year, remember, the Steelers' offense at different times, missing Bryant, missing Bell, and Roethlisberger, of course. And I was looking at the stats this week when I was updating my quarterback rankings, and Roethlisberger had 3,980-something yards in 12 games. Now, if you just do the math, if you project that over 16 games, he would have had the third highest yardage total in history. Now, of course, he doesn't usually play 16 games, so that's the snag there. But the point is, this is going to be a very productive pass offense. And hey, Antonio Brown might get 2,000 yards. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Antonio Brown break Marvin Harrison's record for catches in a year. But Roethlisberger's still going to throw a lot. This defense is probably going to keep them in the types of games where Roethlisberger will throw a lot. Le'Veon Bell, hey, he might catch 70, 80 passes if he stays healthy. Where else is it going to come from? Maybe Ladarius Green. My point is this: even if you give Antonio Brown 2,000 yards and you give Le'Veon Bell, say, 600 or 700 yards, you're still looking at half of if you project out to 16 games, what Roethlisberger would have gotten last year, around 5,300, 5,400 yards. There's still something there. Now, it could be Marcus Wheaton. It could be Ladarius Green. It could be Sammy Coates. Sammy Coates is the cheapest in drafts. Sammy Coates has the deep ball profile. He can do a lot of the same things they were doing with Martavis Bryant. You ask him to run quick screens, and you have him run 9 routes and see if he can outrun guys. So I think that same profile with Martavis Bryant helped us have somebody at least that was worth rostering as a what-the-heck flex because of the big playability. But with Antonio Brown drawing coverage with Ladarius Green, with Le'Veon Bell, Sammy Coates is going to be in one-on-one coverage against one of the inferior defensive backs on a team. So, yes, I'm very interested. And as much as I liked Marcus Wheaton at Oregon State, he had a chance last year with Bryant suspended to do more. Now, he did come on in that Seattle game and played better at the end of the season, but I think we could see Sammy Coates as the number 2 wide receiver for this team and pretty early in the season. So I think because he's the cheapest and because we know somebody else in this Pittsburgh pass offense is going to hit, I'll take a chance.
We haven't seen good timing with Wheaton. As you mentioned, he did come on a little better at the end of the year, and that Seattle game was amazing. But one of the disappointing things about Wheaton is him and Roethlisberger don't seem simpatico. So maybe Coates can be that guy. Matt, we saw Coates at the Senior Bowl. I appreciated the fact that he showed up as he wasn't a senior, but he was able to, and he was out there. But I go back to the book on players, Matt. You write the book on players, okay? You write the rookie scouting portfolio. You know the book. You wrote it. Can Sammy Coates be different from his book?
I like the fact that Sammy Coates has worked out very well to get in shape. The area where I think that there's been concern with him is tracking the ball over his head. That's where he's had issues being able to catch the football. If he can somehow get better at doing that, then you have a chance at becoming a complete player. And if that happens, then you're looking at a guy who could be a really good number 2 in an offense regardless of who he's playing with and regardless of what team he's with. In this particular scheme, and with Ben Roethlisberger, I don't think it will matter as much because really what he does well is go up and rebound the ball. If he can face the quarterback and rebound the ball, he has a good chance to make plays. That's an area where he may be better than Martavis Bryant, or he was better than Martavis Bryant if you compared them both as college players. At the same time, I would have also said that Sammy Coates was a better player after the catch than Martavis Bryant when you compare them both in college. But after seeing Martavis Bryant run through some defenses last year, certainly I don't know if I would make that same statement now based on what I've seen in the NFL. I think where Coates wins in this particular case is on the shorter passes. You get him into the open field and let him run after the catch. He's very strong for his size. He has good moves. He knows how to run the football. And then really after that, I think that if you get the ball in the general area and he can turn back and face the quarterback on these plays, I think he has a better chance of making plays than, say, being wide open and having to run under a ball or having someone in tight coverage at his back where he's trying to catch it, because I think that's probably going to be harder for him to correct. And if he does, more power to him. but I think he's more of a guy that gives Ben Roethlisberger a chance to not be 100% pinpoint accurate, and maybe make some plays that he couldn't connect on with Marcus Wheaton, who was a better route runner and a smoother player overall, but shorter and may not fit in that degree. So I like him at the end of drafts. I certainly agree with Bloom about where he's going. Why not take the chance on him? And regardless of any of the upside talk about Antonio Brown or what's going to go on with this offense, they will need to throw to different players. They've done well throwing to different players, and those players have performed well as fantasy options. So why not Sammy Coates that late and getting a chance at a guy who could, at worst, maybe be a nice flex play for you?
Well, I don't want to turn this into a rally because I didn't plan on talking about Marcus Wheaton that much, but there are certain guys, and I'll bring this in with Coates as well. There are certain players that are second-team guys. Emmanuel Sanders. Steelers couldn't do anything with Emmanuel Sanders, and he goes to Denver with Peyton Manning, blows it up. And now we see him, and he's going to get paid soon, and we see what he can do and what he can be for an offense. Wheaton, maybe it can be Sanders-like with another team. And with Coates, I think Coates is a go-get-it receiver. You throw it right to him, he's going to drop it. You make him go get it, like Plexico Burress back in the day. Make him go get it, and he'll go get it, and he'll make spectacular plays. Dr. Gene, any thoughts here on Coates?
Not specifically on Coates, but I think the Steelers' offense is going to be likely very good and score lots of points and move the ball up and down the field. And one of those three players, Coates, Wheaton, or Ladarius Green, are going to put up some numbers. And I guess it could be spread around between all three of them. But been waiting for Green to step forward, been waiting for Wheaton to step forward. Both of them have shown some flashes. I don't know why it can't be Sammy Coates. And there are some issues with all three of those guys, but I feel like one of them is going to step forward. And just from a value perspective, I think Coates is a good bet just for all the reasons Bloom talked about.
Me? Hello?
Hello. It's
Am I back on Sammy Coates?
It's a.
The Penguins just got a penalty. Okay, the 6 minutes left, and they're going to. So.
I think they've only had about 500 shots in the last.
I know.
Period.
Bloom, you're lucky that you get NBN, NBCSN, or whatever that's Outdoor Life Network, whatever it's on.
Ah, jeez. Are they going to have
I'm sorry.
Are you going to have to cover the Lance? You have to say some nice things about the NHL if you're going to have
the Stanley Cup Final is must-see TV, and there are guys that go to my gym that go there to watch the game because they can't watch it at home.
Right.
Okay, they're doing a disservice to one of the spectacles in all of sports, but anyway, I digress. Bloom, let's talk about Gio Bernard.
Yeah.
Getting that new deal, and we got to look at this Eifert situation. No Sanu, no Marvin Jones, okay. AJ Green, awesome. But can they use Bernard more as a slot receiver? Just use him more as a receiver in general to kind of help things out? How does the split go down? How do fantasy owners approach this Gio Bernard situation?
Well, the big question here in Cincinnati is, without Marvin Jones and Mohamed Sanu, where does some of that slack get taken up? Now, the pie could get smaller. It certainly would make sense for this team to get more conservative. I do think that Andy Dalton becomes less attractive. Jeremy Hill becomes more attractive just because you think there'll be more balance on offense. With Tyler Eifert in this injury, Gene has talked about that. I'm sure we'll be talking about that a lot as he gets closer to the field during training camp and preseason. You have a void to fill there, and it just makes sense for it to be Giovanni Bernard. And look, from our point of view in fantasy leagues, you like drafting Giovanni Bernard, if only because he generally comes out of the gate pretty hot. I don't know if he wears down because of his size, the touches build up, but they seem more willing to give him 15, 18, 20 touches early in the season than they are later in the season, where it's more of a Jeremy Hill time. But here's what I like about Giovanni Bernard. He's good. He's good at football. You watch him play, he's a really good running back. Generally, he looks like the best running back on the team in any given game, and looks like the kind of player that just from a very basic standpoint, you say, why don't they give the ball to him more than that other guy who generally runs up the back of his blockers, who makes us pine for the days of Landale White. And I think that Giovanni Bernard is a player entering his prime now. They've got him signed long-term. He can contribute as a receiver. I think you may see him approach 65, 70, 75 catches with the targets freed up. And I think he's just 3 years, $15.5 million is basically starter money in this NFL, certainly a core part of the offense. So I see him falling to the 6th round of PPR leagues. I'm fine with him as my running back 2 going into the season. And I think that especially with Eifert slow potentially coming out of the gate and the usage patterns with Bernard and Hill, he may be someone to draft. And when his value gets up close to running back 1 level, maybe swap him for somebody who could come on in the second half of the season. But I have a lot of Giovanni Bernard in all those MFL 10s that I'm doing, Cease. I'm only in 2 right now, by the way.
It's a slow time for Bloom.
And there will be a pre-camp. I'm doing my pre-camp tiers right now. I did quarterback and running back. As I get through the rest of the positions, then we'll do another MFL 10 guide. But I think Giovanni Bernard's a terrific pick, whether redraft, MFL 10, because this is a good running back and a good offense that needs some guys to do more, and he's in position to do that now, and clearly they see him as part of their long-term plans.
You notice what Bloom did there, Matt? You notice how sneaky that was to take a shot at the NHL, just speaking the truth, and then Bloom brings up my man, Lendale White, smells like the sweetest Chiba. It's like when you get in an argument in a relationship and you always bring out the the swords. I wasn't the one who was a runaway when his dad died, like stuff like that. I wasn't the one.
Exactly.
You think Lendale White's sexy? Are you looking at his butt? Like, yes, of course I am. Spectacular.
Right. Oh, see, so remember the first time we talked about the first time I shut you down? We talked about Tyrone Moss. Wasn't that just bring a tear to my eye? Let's go down memory lane together.
Trust me, Bloom. I got Andre Ellington on this list of topics, so we'll go right back at it.
We'll get Caddy. He's got a role.
Right, we'll get Caddy on this show. Matt, what are your thoughts about Gio, the new money, and what is that on your screen?
That's big. Apparently the Steelers got some new cheerleaders.
I'm glad you had fun.
There we go. It's war. There we go. All right. So what do I think of Gio?
Yeah, what do you think of Gio, and are they going to use him more as a receiver because they need to?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think they need to. I'm a little bit afraid that the Cincinnati Bengals are going to go the way of the Atlanta Falcons this year. When you look at Matt Ryan in 2014, he was the number 8 fantasy quarterback, and he had a little bit. He still had the makings of a decent offense in the sense that he had an offensive coordinator who figured out how to deal with all the line issues and the lack of skill talent they had outside of Julio Jones. Before it was just the Julio Jones show, they had a really well-balanced unit with Roddy White still in his prime and able to beat really anybody on coverage on timing routes, and then you had Tony Gonzalez, and so you had a well-balanced unit, much like what the Bengals had when they had, in addition to Green, a healthy Tyler Eifert, Mohamed Sanu, and Marvin Jones. You could diversify that offense. You also gave Andy Dalton enough targets that he could still operate as a timing quarterback without having to do anything more to make plays on a consistent basis. And even then, Andy Dalton was not a great fantasy quarterback for us throughout those years, other than maybe he had 2 seasons where he's been a quarterback 1. Most of the time he's been a mid-range quarterback 2 in anything under a 14-team league. So looking at this situation, I'm not sold that Brandon LaFell is the answer. I'm not sold that Tyler Eifert's going to be back healthy. And I'm not sold that this team is going to acclimate to Ken Zampese, even though he's been there for a while as a quarterback coach. He's a disciple of the Mike Martz offense when back in the past. I mean, that was where he really grew up and learned his stuff as a professional coach. So I wonder if he's talking about there's much more that we can get from Andy Dalton, and I'm sure that maybe there's more that he feels that he can do being his longtime quarterback coach. But I look at the personnel and the new offense and some of the changes with that offense, and I'm skeptical that it's going to happen because Atlanta changed its offense from Dirk Cutter, who did miracles without Gonzalez and a healthy Roddy White in 2014, or even a healthy Steven Jackson, and Matt Ryan was the number 8 quarterback. This year, new offense with the Shanahans, with Kyle Shanahan, and he basically dropped, I think, 9? He didn't have 9. He had 9 fewer touchdowns in the red zone last year, and he dropped from being the number 8 fantasy quarterback to being, a guy that you wouldn't even consider starting most of the time. And I just wonder if we're going to see something similar for the Cincinnati Bengals. So when it gets to Giovanni Bernard, I think that actually helps Bernard in a sense because if Eifert isn't healthy and the only game in town is A.J. Green, who could even put up a Julio Jones-like season last year, like Julio Jones did, and still not have great passing stats for the quarterback, you could probably get a little bit more dump-off action for for Bernard, because the running game may not work out all that well if they have more 3-and-outs, if they have more situations where they can't really take it into the end zone, take it in terms of red zone play, and that's where the play is going to drop the most when it comes to a change in offenses, is the red area of the field where the team is just not as fluent with each other when it comes to playing well in compressed spaces with compressed time periods. And I think that this is where having a guy like Bernard may actually help out even more, because he's going to get more dump-off plays. They probably won't have as many opportunities inside the 5, and that means that, Bernard's going to be on the field more. They'll probably throw to him more. And the woe for the Bengals offense as a whole that I'm thinking might happen might actually be a boon for someone like Bernard.
Dr. Gene, let's talk about your neck of the woods there around Cincinnati. You in the neighborhood, listen to Ass Crack and Ball Sack in the morning, Mayhem in the AM out in Cincinnati. What's kind of the buzz on Bernard and this new deal?
Not too much. I think everybody seems to like it. Bernard is, right now everybody is in this area is not a big fan of Jeremy Hill after that fumble at the end of the Steelers game. So there's always been a little bit of a clamor for Bernard to get a few more touches. I think that's likely to happen. The Bengals like to extend their own if they have a chance to do so, and they weren't willing to pay Marvin Jones and Mohamed Sanu what they were going to get on the open market. But Bernard probably wasn't going to get that. This is a good deal for him. It's a good deal for the Bengals. I think they're going to use him. I don't know that they're going to put him out in the slot necessarily, but I think you're going to see him as Sig said. He's, I don't think that 75 catches is outside the range of possibility at all. I don't know that we're going to see his carries go up necessarily, especially if Jeremy Hill can get back and it to be what he was a couple of years ago when he was at his best. But I think we're going to see Bernard get more run in the offense than maybe what we had expected even before the extension.
Well, looks like we got time for one more topic. Bloom, I'm going to put the Andre Ellington discussion on the back burner, and we'll get back to that.
Okay.
There was a story.
I'm already sad now, so you might as well just take your shots. You can't hurt me right now. The Penguins lost.
Did they lose?
They lost. So it's going to go back to San Jose game for games. It's over. Everyone who knows me knows it's over. The Penguins, the Stanley Cup. They was in the building. They didn't put it up. So
at some point, did you
cannot make me any sadder. I did not bloom them. I actually went out to get some chicken and some waffle fries and watched the first period of the game out while I was eating my dinner, and they scored 2 goals in the first 3 minutes. San Jose that did that is, and I immediately left and I said I'm going, and in the car, the Penguins scored the 2 goals to tie it up, and then as soon as I had it on again, San Jose scored again. So I'm blaming you, Cecil, and everyone out there for this show, because if I was just driving around in my car right now, the Penguins would be holding up the Stanley Cup.
Oh man, I'm wearing Penguins colors or Steelers
That's
colors.
Start.
As it may be.
DeVito Penguin.
Yeah.
Could you have hooked up a Bloom dash cam from your car?
That's what I should have done. We could have just been driving around Austin. Big fan of Parliament.
Right. There we have it. One more quickly, just because I want to pick y'all's brain. And Madam, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
Wendell Smallwood. There is a player, I don't think he's getting overhyped, but he's a player that needs some attention, deserves some attention, but how much attention? Because what's one of my biggest fallbacks for running backs is I want to see creativity as a runner. And with Smallwood, you see some technique, you see some discipline as a runner. You don't necessarily see creativity in terms of creating his own space by using multiple moves to create that space, juke moves, a drop step, what have you, shoulder shimmy, and really you see a guy that's going to go where it's blocked. And not to wrap up all Mountaineer running backs and say this is what they've all been like, but, well, follow your blocks, stay behind your lead guy, and go to where the hole's at. Not be creative, not be elusive. People and fantasy owners certainly get excited about it because everyone knows Ryan Matthews will get hurt. Death, taxes, Ryan Matthews getting hurt. It's a given. So Smallwood's there. Darren Sproles is happy to be there. But what are your thoughts and opinions on Smallwood and the opportunity, which is there, but what does he do with that opportunity? And to me, this isn't a Spencer Ware situation, because Ware at LSU was very creative as a runner and used a lot of power to create his own space. Even Sharkhandrick West, with that speed, shows the ability to make people miss and to create his own space in the open field. I haven't seen it with Smallwood. I know the opportunity is going to be there. They're not one of those teams that's in the conversation about Arian Foster, unless we hear something differently, Bloom. Anyway, Matt, what are your thoughts on Smallwood, a player who has been getting a lot of fantasy buzz, and for good reason? And the reason is that opportunity.
Well, contract be damned, Spencer Ware is actually a starting level talent in the NFL, and there were certainly circumstances with that. So I think it's more of opportunity that he got in. I would say when you look at a guy like Smallwood, he's not a starter level talent. He's a guy that when you look at him, he can catch the football. And saying that he can catch the football well, it's kind of like saying they're excited about Jeff Janis because he's playing well on special teams. Now, if he can continue to work on his routes, we're going to be really excited about him. Well, the headline may say they're excited about Jeff Janis, but the story actually was he still needs to work on his routes. And we all know that Aaron Rodgers likes guys who are actually where they're supposed to be, like Jared Abbrederis. So when we look at a guy like Wendell Smallwood, what I saw with him as a player was someone that just really didn't even understand how to time gap plays extremely well. And with gap plays, you don't have to do a lot of creativity. You want to get out in front of your blocks as soon as you possibly can and get past the line of scrimmage as fast as you can to be able to take advantage of those pulling players. So when I saw him, I wasn't overly impressed. I was kind of surprised that they were so high on him or excited about him as a player. And I think that maybe if I were looking at the players, just based on what I've seen on tape that they have on their depth chart, Darren Sproles saying that he's just happy to be there is probably the best smartass comment that I've heard of all OTA training camp. It's kind of like saying, oh, I don't know, Sigmund Bloom saying, I'm just happy to be writing about fantasy football, for peanuts right now. I mean, that would be basically the same exact thing as like if NFL.com hired him and said that we're gonna give you an opportunity again, as if like he was just like a stringer somewhere. To me, that's just ridiculous. Certainly, Darren Sproles, to me, is the number 2 back on this depth chart right now, or he will be once Doug Peterson finds out what he has.
Right, Doug Peterson's just got to figure that out. What it reminds me of is Jack Del Rio going to Baskin Robbins. He's like, 31 flavors, I just need vanilla. That's all I need.
He's on Twitter now. CC's on Twitter now. You can tell him directly. You tweet that at him. Get in his mention.
Tweet at JDR and then see the reaction therein. Bloom, your thoughts here on Smallwood, because we know, and this is going to happen, and the great thing is, it's like, who's it going to be? The opportunity is going to rise multiple times across the league for a 3rd or 4th string back.
Right.
But they have to be good. Like, you can have the opportunity, but if you're not good enough, you won't thrive or flourish the way a Sharkhandrick West did or Spencer Ware did. What's the situation with Smallwood in your eyes?
Well, I don't know if you have to be truly good in that kind of situation.
Well, you have to have a good system, and a Doug Peterson offense.
So I'll bring up Javorius Allen last year. I don't think Javorius Allen really was playing that well, but Mark Trestman's system feeds the running back as a receiver out of the backfield. So Smallwood's interesting from a PPR perspective for that. I think Matt brings up a really good point, though. A lot of our projecting of Smallwood for opportunity, forget about talent and ability to take advantage of it, just opportunity, was based on Ryan Matthews' injury history, and then that Darren Sproles seemed to be on the outs with the team. One B writer saying he may not make the team. You're looking at him as a potential trade target, and I would love him as a trade target, say Indianapolis. And that's another situation, much like Philly, where we're watching to see who the backup's going to be. We don't really know yet. But Josh Ferguson, Trey Williams, there you go, Matt, and of course Robert Turbin. So anyway, Darren Sproles, if he's not traded, that takes some of the luster off of Wendell Smallwood, because we saw Sproles being traded or cut and Smallwood going to that role and having a potential PPR floor from week to week of 2, 3, 4, 5 catches, and then if they start mixing him in as a complement to Matthews, or even if Matthews goes down, we'll watch what Kenyon Barner does. Never really been on board there. Actually, Philly looks to me like a team, much like Indy, again, that is liable to pick up, say, one of Buffalo's cast-offs. Hearing good things about James Wilder Jr., and they just re-signed Boom Herron and actually need some bodies there. So I think that Smallwood opportunity in a PPR league was there, and now it's diminishing. That being said, I would agree that he is just a guy from a talent standpoint, but I think that in a system where he could get fed as a receiver out of the backfield, because what else do they have? I mean, Zach Ertz, yeah. Jordan Matthews in the slot, okay. Ruben Randall. Nelson Aguilar still not turning the corner. I mean, it's still early. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
A lot of passes out of the backfield. We're talking about Sam Bradford, remember? I want to know who the good pass-catching back is in this backfield. But right now, as Matt was saying, it's probably Darren Sproles.
Can I just add one quick thing, because you mentioned about Sproles and maybe the possibility of a trade somewhere down the line or something like that. I could see as a GM if you were like, we need a back and we just need one for like 1 year and we just need one guy. You want to see a guy just go crazy on the league. Trade for Darren Sproles and say, you're going to be our feature guy. You're going to get 1 year just to do it. I know your career's coming to an end, but you're going to get to be the guy. I would love to see what would happen in the right team and fit situation, whether he could pull that Warwick Dunn kind of, big season out. And I'm sure he could. And because a guy like that has to be motivated for at least a chance to not to be considered, okay, well, here's your lane, and this is what you can be. And that may be true, but ask that guy who's had to defy the odds all these years whether or not he wanted one shot to be the man. And I'm sure that it would be fun to see what would happen.
I'd like the Jets to sign him just to play quarterback. Or I'd like to see Miami sign him and give him that opportunity. Honestly, Adam Gase, the more and more that I hear about Miami and the tools they're in, the more I get excited about that Miami offense. Dr. Gene, final thoughts on the evening.
Final thoughts on the evening. Sorry, Bloom. I was rooting for the Pens, too.
I thought you were going to ask yourself a question.
Oh, yeah. I appreciate all of the images that people send me.
Keep them coming.
That was the one who sent me that. Who was that sent me? We probably should give him a shout, whoever that was. Scott McLean. Well done, Scott.
Scott, we appreciate you, and thanks for playing along. Matt, final thoughts.
Well, my condolences, Bloom, but we're glad that you were on the show with us, and we definitely do need to have a dashboard cam, especially you heading to the pizza joint you always go to.
That's right. I can show everybody where all the shortcuts are in Austin whenever you come here to get to all the good places.
Here's what you do, Bloom, and ride with me here. I'm just brainstorming at this moment. Notice the smoke. It's like the cash cab. Yeah. Or like Bloober instead of Bloober. And what you do is you pay people when you give them a ride. Did you watch This Week Tonight? Exactly, for the conversation. Yeah, This Week Tonight. And John Oliver paid a bunch of money back for medical debt that he bought for pennies on the dollar. I want you to start Bloober. Everybody get the app, and then you pay people to ride with you for the conversation.
Yeah. And when there's nobody, I can just cruise down, I can just slowly roll on the street and like lean over the passenger.
And we have a camera.
Can you just imagine a shot where like Ron rolls the window and Gene's sitting there on a park bench and he's like, hell no.
No. No, and that's how new on the couch episodes could be recorded too.
Exactly.
No, Bloober. I like this. I think this could be our $1 billion idea right here.
There we have it. He's Sigmund Bloom. Follow him on Twitter, because most of you do already.
Sign up for Bloober.
At Sigmund Bloom, and sign up for Bloober. Hashtag Bloober. Want to get that trending. Matt Waldman, the author of the Rookie Scouting Portfolio, at Matt Waldman. Dr. Gene Bramall, at Gene Bramall. I'm at Cecil Amy. The show is at the Audible. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, as always. Stay tuned and stay frosty.